Okay, so today we'll be going through the economics A-level AQA spec. So you can see here that this is what we have so far for the first few subtopics on the spec. And I want to go through the AQA one just because they lay out the content very nicely. They give you more information about what they want you to know, which is really helpful compared to like other exam boards. But also I did study the Edexcel and it's really, really similar. So I think this is applicable for any exam board. But yeah, let's get started with talking about economics as a social science and the difference between natural sciences and social sciences and positive and normative statements. So this is just an intro, quite casual, quite normal. So let's get started. So I'm here with my student and she'll be answering some of our questions today. So yeah, anyways, in economics, you need to make assumptions. So assumptions are really important. Economics assumptions are important. Obviously, that's really basic, but basically, you can't really conduct scientific experiments in economics. So you have to make up models and you have to use real life scenarios like the Great Financial Crisis to basically come up with ways to use this model. So, ceteris paribus is an example of. Have you heard of this? Ceteris
Yeah.
paribus.
It's
And what do you think it
assuming
means?
all things are constant.
Okay, it's assumption. So assuming that all things are being held constant. So this is like if we're finding out an experiment, I don't know, to see how inflation affects the economy, we'd have to assume that all other things like interest rates, the confidence in the economy, level of government spending, all of that, we just have to assume it's constant just so we can figure out how that variable is interacting. So it's kind of just like the normal sciences when you have biology or chemistry and you're doing an experiment, there's something you have to control and keep constant so you can take a look at the factor that you actually want to measure. So have you heard of positive and normative statements before?
Yes.
What's the difference between positive and normative statements?
I think the normative statement is when it's a opinion and it can't be checked.
Okay, yeah, close. But basically, positive statements are objective. So what this means is that they're basically factual. So they are facts. They can be they're tested with they're factual like they're tested with factual evidence. So it's like higher temperatures will lead to more demand for ice cream. This is a positive statement. It can be tested. It can be tested with factual evidence. So it's not actually factual, but it can be tested with factual evidence. What this basically means is that G, if they raise if they okay, let's just say if they increase the amount of benefits they give out, the government, if the government increases the amount of benefits it gives out, then more people will choose to be unemployed. This is something that we can actually test with facts, with numbers, and just see if it actually works. So let's just say another example, increasing tax on sweets will lead to a fall in demand for them. So this might be true, might not be true, but we can test it out and it can be tested out pretty well with factual evidence. That's great. You can see that in these kind of things, it has words like will and it is, and this means that they can be tested and examined, and then if they're good, they'll be rejected or accepted. Do you feel like you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your understanding of normative statements, given that positive statements are objective?
So they're subjective and they can't be tested with factual evidence.
Okay, well done. So they're subjective. So they're based on something called value judgments. So what value judgments are kind of just opinions that people have. So words like should. So for example, I'm trying to think of one. So the government should provide free transport. Government should provide transport. So this is an example of a normative statement because it's basically someone's opinion. Like there's no right or wrong. Like someone could believe something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, a fact. So this is just kind of that's what a value judgment is. That's what a normative statement is. So it's important to remember the distinction between positive and normative statements. So value judgments, what they are is they're quite important when you're dealing with economic policies because it helps, politicians, economists make decisions about the economy. So yeah, that's basically it for going through, economic methodology. So if we're going to go through the nature and the purpose of economic activity, just talking about what is the point of economics? What is the point of economic activity? The point of economic activity is that we want to produce goods and services that satisfy needs and wants. So we want to satisfy. Yeah.
Miss, I don't know what economic policies are, and I want to know. So, can you explain why you said that value judgments? Would you say value judgments help economic policy? What was it?
Oh yeah, so value judgments are basically normative statements. So when you say someone should spend more money on this, or free markets shouldn't have any government intervention or any of these kind of things, they help you with policies. Like when the government's deciding stuff, when economists are deciding stuff for the country, they can do that with value judgments.
So you're saying that they can change the opinion of of the mayor because of their value judgment?
No, but they are important to discuss. So obviously, it's basically what I'm trying to say is basically important to discuss your opinions. Um, yeah, and what you think should happen, and then based on different kinds of positive statements, we can make a conclusion.
Okay.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, that's great. So now we're talking about economic activity and the purpose of it. So obviously, the purpose is to satisfy needs and wants. So what is going on, what is economic activity? It's basically producing goods and services with goods and services. So the needs and wants of consumers are satisfy needs and wants of consumers with goods and services. Does that sound pretty okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're doing is we're using resources, inputs from the factors of production to basically produce outputs, which are the goods and services. So economists, their role is they have to make decisions. So the decisions that economists have to make are what is going to be produced. So this is something you need to remember. You need to remember the different decisions that economists make. So these are the key economic decisions: what to produce, how to produce it, and who is going to benefit from the goods and services produced. So like if you're a company, you need to decide what am I going to make? And for example, if the government needs to know how much money they're spending on something, so this is obviously introduces something called opportunity cost, which is like the cost of choosing one thing over another thing. So for example, if you go to a shop and you have £5, or let's just say you have £1, and you can either buy a chocolate bar or a lollipop, and you decide to pick the chocolate bar, the opportunity cost of picking that chocolate bar would be not picking the lollipop. So you won't get the lollipop. So the opportunity cost would be the lollipop. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what the opportunity cost is. So that's why it's important to make these decisions. So that way we're basically accepting that there's going to be an opportunity cost, but we're choosing what's best for the consumer, or the company's choosing what's best for them. So how should it be produced? So obviously, if we were a company and we're making stuff, a firm, if we're making stuff, then we'd have to decide how we're going to produce it, how are we going to use our factors of production, how should it be produced? So obviously, we'd want to use something that minimizes costs and maximizes our profits. So something that might be more labor intensive or more capital intensive. So labor intensive is something to do with more workers, and something that's capital intensive is to do with more in machinery. So this is all important decisions that someone has to make when they're, doing something economic. Who will benefit from the goods and services provided? So who is the target audience? If it's a firm, for example, the goods and services provided. Okay, so yeah, it's people that are willing and able to pay for the good and service will get the good and service. So that's kind of to do with demand. And yeah, so those are the main, nature and purpose of economic activity. And those are the main economic decisions. So these are what they are, and you have to memorize these. Then we'll move on to talk about economic resources. So what are economic resources? What they want us to talk about here is land, labor, capital, enterprise. These are the factors of production. Are you familiar with the factors of production?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is economic resources. So we've got a mnemonic, a common mnemonic that we use is cell. So we've got capital, enterprise, labor, and land. So capital, can you guess what that is?
It's like machinery and
Yeah. So it's basically the goods that are used when you're producing stuff. So the goods used in production. So that could be machinery, e.g. machinery. What is enterprise?
like a business or like an entrepreneur that has an idea.
Oh yeah, so entrepreneurship is another way you could refer to it. Entrepreneurship. And yeah, you're right. It's basically someone who takes risks. So it's usually an entrepreneur. Risks. It's always a tricky word to spell. That's why enterprise might be better to write. Yeah, someone who takes risks, someone who innovates and uses their factors of production. So it's usually like a business person, an entrepreneur. Labor. What is labor?
It's when you make people work or you work yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a type of capital actually. Do you know what the name is for this type of capital?
No.
No?
No. Oh, is
Human
it?
capital.
Oh,
Have you heard of
human.
it?
Oh no, I haven't
Okay,
heard of.
so labor is a form of human capital. So capital is machinery, but in economics, the term human capital basically refers to labor, and it's to do with like just the workforce basically. So people working. So you got that right.
Yeah.
Then we're talking about land. So we all know what land is, but in economics, we kind of want to specifically talk about natural resources. So can you give me an example of natural resources, please?
Like gold ores or like
Just typical ones that you might use on the daily as a company.
wood.
Yeah. So wood, oil, coal, wheat, gas, all of these kind of things. These are all examples of land, even though they're not really physical land, they're just raw materials you get from the land. So that's kind of what we're referring to in economics. In economics, they also want us to go through the rewards for the factors of production. So could you think of what the reward for capital is?
Interest.
Yeah.
Interest
So
rates.
it's
Or is it
interest
no?
from the
It's just
investment.
interest.
Yeah, it's just interest. So interest from the investment. And what about entrepreneurship? What is the reward for taking that risk?
Profit.
Done. I need to make sure that reward is, make sure this is clear. Okay. I'll just, yeah, what do you think labor's reward is?
Wages.
Well done. Wages. And then land, what do you think the reward for land is? Imagine
it
you're a landlord, what's your reward?
rent?
Well done. So yeah, that's basically it. Those are the basic resources that they want us to go through. They also want us to talk about, renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Could you tell me the difference between them?
So renewable resources are resources that can be replaced. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, would be like a solar panel, right?
Is
No, no,
solar
no,
panels?
no.
Oh,
It's not that. It's renewable resources would be like something that can be replaced.
so solar power, right? Because solar panels aren't, a power.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like solar energy, oxygen, fish. I mean, fish is a weird one because obviously they can run out, but they usually don't. Um, and if a resource is used faster than it's renewed, then it will decline over time. So we also have something called non-renewable resources, and you probably know what this is. Could you explain it to me?
It can't be replenished, so it's like finite. So it
Mm-hmm.
would run out easily if you don't if you keep on using it.
Well done. So an example?
It would be like coal or like um greenhouse, something that emits greenhouse gases. So
Yeah. Coal, oil, all of that stuff. Yeah, well done. So also in economics, we've got something called environmental economics. We try to be sustainable as we can. So what we do is in terms of like fishing, there's sometimes fishing quotas. There's stuff in place to try to reduce the amount that we're wasting. So that way renewable resources don't run out. Like deforestation, we obviously want to prevent that as much as we can. So we want to reduce that. But yeah, that's just an important bit that they want us to know. These are just the basics, the outlines that we need to go through. Scarcity, choice, and allocation of resources. So this is the last bit that we're going to go through. And this is basically the problem, the basic economic problem. Are you familiar with the basic economic problem? I mean, this
yeah,
is a
so
recap.
there's infinite demand, but there's a um a scarce resource, like scarce resources.
Okay,
To so there's finite resources but infinite demand.
well done, well done. What they want you to say is unlimited wants, limited resources. Limited wants, but limited resources. That's it. But yeah, I know you know what you wanted to say, so I'm not really worried. Um, yeah, so we want to basically distribute these resources as well as we can. Yeah, so for example, if you have £1, you could either buy, the chocolate or the lollipop. That's a choice you have to make. That's an economic choice. You have unlimited wants, but you have limited resources, so you can only like, work with what resources you have. So this is where opportunity cost comes in. We've talked about this briefly earlier. So what do you think, like, what do you think definition is for this?
Um, is it's the cost of taking of making a choice
Mm-hmm.
um of the next possible outcome or something.
Okay, yeah, close. It's the cost of the next best alternative. So this is the definition you need to memorize, right?
Yeah.
So and in an exam, sometimes if it's a 2 marker, for example, define opportunity cost and it's 2 marks. The other mark could be an example. So the example that I just gave you would have been okay, like e.g. £1, and you have to choose between chocolate and crisps or chocolate and a lollipop. So that's something you need to know. So you have to look at the marks that are underneath each question. So yeah, opportunity cost is also important for the government. The common example that I used to use in my exam was, e.g., government spending on healthcare, um, government spending on healthcare and education. I think everyone uses this one. or education. So, for example, would the government has to make a decision, should I spend more on education? And if I spend more on education, I'm spending less on healthcare. And if I'm spending more on healthcare, I'm spending less on education. So this is a common example that I used to use a lot. So yeah. But yeah, I think we've gone through all of these, the first 4 points, just talking about opportunity cost, unlimited wants and limited resources, nature of economic activity, and just basic economic methodology. So I hope this helped.